Hey everyone, welcome back to Table for Two, where the coffee's hot, the stories are honest, and the ministry life is always a little unpredictable.
We are your hosts, Jason and Nicole, two pastors doing life together. We're raising kids, serving the church, and trying not to let the house burn down in the process.
True story. Today's episode is one we've looked forward to for a while because we're talking about something very close to home. We're talking about what it means to raise pastors' kids without breaking them.
That's an important add on there. Because they say pastors' kids either end up in ministry or therapy, or both, more likely both. But honestly, there's some truth behind that joke. There's always so much beauty, so much struggle, and sacred ground in their stories.
Yes, and we're not telling this story alone. We have a special friend of ours joining us for this episode.
Yes.
This is Table for Two.
Through storms and swallowed our noise, church keys in hand, coffee and mugs, our lives held together by grace and a few hugs. They said she submits, we said we both do. It's not about ladders, it's me and you, serving the kingdom in aprons and jeans, laugh lines and calloused hands and holy routines. At this table for two, there's room for you. Pull up a chair, we'll tell the truth of love and faith with the side of faith-filled talk.
Well, before we dive into the main content of this episode, let's start off with our Table for Two lighthearted question of the week. And the question is, what's one thing one of our kids has done during church that made you want to disappear through the floorboards?
There's one story that comes to mind, and I think you know what it is. And it wasn't during church, it was during Bible study. I'm not sure I should share it because there's a little language in it. What do you think?
I think you should share it. But just know we don't talk this way normally. But for the sake of this story, we might have to up our rating to PG-13.
Okay, so I guess I'll share it. So when we were in Meadville, I was hosting a Bible study, and Jason had taken the kids upstairs to kind of keep an eye on them because it was a ladies' Bible study, and we were going over some lady stuff, I guess. And my son Benjamin decided that he wanted to get a drink of water, which required him to come downstairs and go through the living room where we were meeting and into the kitchen. So he went and grabbed a cup, and he filled it up with water, and he was in the process of carrying it up the stairs, but he tripped in the living room and he spilled a little bit. And not a big deal.
Yeah, little boys do that.
And it's water. It dries.
Yep.
But this poor little boy, he got so frustrated with himself, and he gets this pouty look on his face, and then he just gets angry, and he's like, damn it! Now, again, we don't talk this way. And actually, before I could even react, our board secretary was there, and she was amazing. And she's just like, honey, we don't talk like that. And poor little Ben gets so heartbroken because he knew he had made a mistake. He had said an adult word that he is not allowed to say. And he thought he was in so much trouble. And so he starts crying, and we're like, honey, it's not that big of a deal. But he runs up the stairs, and he sits at the top of the stairs.
Yes.
And just wailing as loud as possible.
Where the ladies can all still see him.
And hear him. But he's wailing at the top of the stairs, and as he's wailing, he's saying the same thing over and over again. I said, damn it!
Yes, and it was hysterical, but mortifying at the same time.
Yes, I definitely wanted to crawl into the floorboards that day. Now, looking back, it's one of the most hilarious stories ever. But it was mortifying then and completely derailed Bible study, I'm not going to lie.
Yes. Well, my story is not really just one story, and it's really not nearly as dramatic as Nicole's. And I probably shouldn't be embarrassed by this, but it did embarrass me a little bit each time it happened. So if you know our oldest daughter, Jaden loves everybody. Mm-hmm. There's not a person that she doesn't see as her friend. She may not know your name, where you're from, or what you're actually into, but she if she meets you, she considers you her friend.
Yeah. And I think the reason why it's embarrassing is because it's so unnatural that assumptions are made about it.
Yes. Well, that and yeah. So every time we've gone to interview somewhere, Jaden is our only child that experienced life with us before we entered the ministry. Like we were involved in ministry, but not to the degree that we are now. And so I remember every time we interviewed somewhere. And keep in mind, Jaden was one when we started this interview process.
Yeah.
Whenever we interviewed somewhere, Jaden had this knack for finding the people she needed to influence the most and convincing them that they liked her enough to hire us. and that's what makes it embarrassing for me, is because it almost in some ways it might make it seem like we were using our daughter to try and get a position, but that's not what was happening. No. It was just Jaden being Jaden. So our first youth pastor job, he was a guy that he had kids of his own, and a couple of them were old enough to where that he could possibly have grandkids. So holding little Jaden, 1-year-old, in his arms made him realize that, and he really did treat Jaden like a granddaughter the entire time we were there. Yeah. We were only there a year, but he treated her so well. That whole church did. And then fast forward to our next youth pastor assignment, which was across the country from Colorado to Pennsylvania. We fly out there, and we're staying with the pastor and his family. And actually, you're going to meet one of this pastor's daughters today. And but we were interviewing with that family. And again, he has a daughter daughters that are growing up, right? One's in high school, one's going off to was getting ready to graduate from college at that point, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so little Jaden, keep in mind she's about 3 now, crawls up into his lap during dinner and falls asleep. Like, she didn't know this guy at all, but she crawled in his lap and fell asleep, and that's how we got that job. My first pastoring job, we were at dinner with our district superintendent on the Pittsburgh district, and Jaden just sits up next to him and just is like buttering him up and brown nosing him to the point where she didn't even need to that time. No. But it really helped influence things. But then fast forward to when we interviewed at our current assignment.
Yeah. This one's
this
cute.
This is the one that, again, it was super cute, but also kind of embarrassing at the same time. So the church we're at now, they just, we came here, we interviewed with the church board. That interview went really well. And then they decided to take our whole family out to a local restaurant here called El Ranchito, and I'm going to publicize them on the air, because if you're ever in Irvine or Ravenna, Kentucky, you need to stop by El Ranchito.
You have to go to El Ranchito.
But anyway, they take us there, and Jaden is sitting next to a lady named Sandy at our church, and Sandy is our board secretary, and so Jaden's sitting next to her, and we're about halfway through the meal where Jaden looks up at Sandy with these big loving eyes and says, "I really hope you pick us." And so needless to say, that night when the board got together to decide whether or not to extend a call to us, Sandy said to us, "I voted for Jaden." And so Jaden was voted in here, and we were the bonus prize, I suppose. But again, I didn't put my kid up to this at all. She just naturally did this.
She just loves people, and she loves being able to connect with them and build relationship with them. And so when she connects with someone, she wants to be able to continue to connect with that person. And so, she connected with Jim, she connected with Raymond, she most recently connected with Sandy, and she just loves being able to build those relationships. And every time we've left, it's been heartbreaking for her, because
these are people she loves.
Yes.
Yeah. But so that's us. That's our story, I guess. Yeah. But with that being said, let's kind of dig into the meat of today's episode.
No, so I'll just do this one.
So today we are not doing this podcast episode alone. We've actually invited Gabrielle DiCamillo-Strope to join us. You do hyphenate, right?
Technically not legally, but.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what Jason wrote. So Gabby, she's not just an amazing person. She's also an adult who survived the life as a PK and lived to tell the tale. She's joining us to reflect on her own story, the joys and the challenges, and what she hope and what hope she can offer other ministry families, especially children.
I'm not calling her Gabrielle. I know her as Gabby. Gabby,
Yeah,
welcome to the
Gabby.
table. Uh, why don't you share a little bit about yourself? You know how you met us, and what it is you hope to share with people through this podcast episode.
Yeah. Please call me Gabby. Only people call me Gabrielle when they're mad at me. But yeah, so I met you guys because you decided to come to a random church in Monongahela, Western Pennsylvania area. And decided that you're gonna be my youth pastor, and then Nicole adopted me as her sister, and I became the aunt to your children, and I can't live without them. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I just graduated from medical school.
Woohoo!
I still live in Pennsylvania, and yeah, my goal in life is to help people.
Love
I
that.
believe that.
Love
Like the way you helped little Kyle through those doors.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah.
that. That might be a deep dive for another
Yes,
episode.
that'd be things not to teach youth group students. And what Gabby might find hard to believe right now is that I'm actually teaching the kids group right now.
Yeah.
So,
And he's doing a really great job of it.
I do find that hard to believe, but
Yeah.
all right.
they're a bunch of like rowdy boys. So
Yeah, that's
right.
why he's
Yeah,
doing
that makes sense.
But no, we love Gabby. She was the first person to hold our son Ben outside of Nicole or myself.
Yeah.
That wasn't medical staff.
Yeah.
Um,
I know your dad was really jealous about that, Gabby.
He's always jealous.
and it's to now my son Ben for a long time thought Gabby was his girlfriend and was really upset when she got married. But I think Ben's finally come around to Joey a little bit. He's kind of started to tolerate him.
Sometimes. Yeah. He still gets mad at me if I don't call him enough, but
He doesn't really tell us when he's like texting people or calling people. Does he text you pretty often?
and yeah, about once a week, and then when we call about once a month, and then every time I call, he's always like, "Gabby, you haven't called me in forever," and I was like, "I'm sorry." I lost track of time.
Not like you're doing anything. No, I'm kidding.
I know. He keeps me he keeps me committed to keeping in touch. So
He demands it.
Yes.
yes.
Well, so yeah. Now, last week, actually, on the podcast, we told the story about when your dad asked the congregation if they could find their Peter, and the reaction of the church youth group, and it was well, I can't remember what the light-hearted question was,
It
but
was just like what is like something shocking that happened during church or
yeah, that's what it was. What's the most shocking thing that ever happened to you during church, or outrageous? And that was my story. So now the whole world knows that story.
Yeah.
So,
and there was
No, that's not the first thing that he said that got the youth
Oh,
group
no.
going.
Do you remember when he couldn't
No,
say
I
the
mean
word?
the one that yeah, I mean the one that I always remember was when he had the whole church praying over us before we went off the camp. And we're all up at the altar, and all I know is the youth group looks up, and the entire church looks like they just raised their hands, but they should have raised them in a different way because
I remember that.
Hitler is not okay.
I remember that. That was something that Julian was like obsessed with after.
yeah, he was all about that. So Gabby, what are some early memories that shapes your identity as a pastor's kid? Like some things that you remember, and maybe things that you that that maybe you help realize that okay, my life's a little different than other
Yeah.
kids.
Yes, of course. I'll do positives and negatives with that one because I feel like it's a two-sided question. And it can be taken two different ways. Well, first off, whenever you kind of start realizing that your life's different as a pastor's kid, is you have more eyes watching you as you're walking around the church. So not only does that mean that you have more people making sure that you're not getting into trouble, but that means you have more rules that you don't know that you have to follow. So that means you have to dress certain ways according to different people in the church, you have to talk certain ways, you have to act certain ways. And the negative to that is they just have this assumed identity that they kind of put on you as a pastor's kid and these expectations that you have to live up to. But I will say a positive to that is you have more people looking out for you. And something I didn't really realize when I was younger is I have all these people I can go to, and as I grew up, I could rely on them more to be there for me. But when I was younger, I just thought of them as, oh, that's another person. Yeah,
Right.
but that's definitely something early on you start to notice is they just have more roles and expectations and put onto you.
Yeah. I think that's something we can definitely sense
Yeah.
on our kids a lot.
It's also it's also something that I, as a teacher's kid, kind of relate to as well, because it was like expected that, I would get, the good grades, even though I didn't.
Mhm.
I was not a good student, but I would also be like well behaved in school and never get into trouble and all this other stuff, and so for me, it's something that I'm acutely aware of, especially like with Jaden, because she is so much her own person and I want to feed into that. So I'm kind of a little, I get bristle a little bit if somebody's like, nope, you have to dress a certain way or do this or sit this way or anything. So no, I try to be gentle. I try.
Um, now, Gabby, do you have any like hilarious or cringeworthy pastor kid stories that you would be comfortable with sharing that people might find entertaining? Um,
Um, what were you gonna say something else to that?
no, I figured I'd
Okay,
just stop there.
yeah, I mean, one that definitely comes to mind. So, I mean, I was a stubborn kid, but there was this one time we were playing, me and my sister and her best friend Maddie, we were playing the fellowship hall, and we were told not to already by like two of the older ladies in the church, and we had like this ball, and my sister and Maddie broke this candle opera thing in
Uh-oh.
the fellowship hall and blamed me on it. And then I'm the one that got in trouble for it.
Mhm.
No one, not my parents. My parents weren't the ones who punished me. It was like the church people. Okay. And then they told my parents later, and then I got punished twice.
Yeah.
And um to this day, my parents still think that I lied about it and was trying to push the blame off, and my sister Maddie still laughs at the fact that they got away with it.
That's mean.
But
That's awful.
that's not the first time that they would blame something on me.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You're the younger
Yeah,
sibling, so scapegoat.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that was when before me and my sister got along, so we're like best friends now, so it's fine. But she used to hate me. But that one's a very vivid memory. I remember being so angry. So I was like, I did not break it. And no one would believe me. Not even my parents. And I got punished twice.
Yeah. That makes it worse when you get punished twice for something you didn't commit and no one will hear you out.
Yes. And then and then another thing that they would do is they would in the women's bathroom, if you turn the light off, it turns off all the lights, like even in the stall. And they knew I was afraid of the dark. So they would come by and turn the light off on me when I was going to the bathroom, and I would like scream and like so loud, and then I would get yelled at for screaming.
But not the one turning the light off in the bathroom.
No, no.
That's hilarious. I miss that bathroom though. That was an awesome bathroom.
Well, this is pretty
I
good
got the
service.
couch and everything.
Yeah, there's a fainting couch in your guys' church bathroom. That is amazing.
I do feel like
Wow,
Ben.
wow.
I do feel like Ben is that kid with us. Like
Oh.
everyone in our church here thinks that Emmy is sweet, innocent, and doesn't talk or say anything, but she's really the troublemaker and the instigator of the whole crew.
She will do everything she can to get everybody else in trouble. She is ornery.
Yes.
And now, what are some misconceptions or assumptions that church folks have made about you as a pastor's kid that you wish maybe
Yeah.
they hadn't done that?
I mean, going back to like how Nicole was saying before, how being like a teacher's kid, you're always like we're assumed to have good grades. And granted, I like eventually, like in high school and college, I eventually got better grades because obviously I ended up becoming a doctor. But I had to really study and try hard and like work to get the grades I got. Like school wasn't easy for me. Like when I was in elementary school, all I wanted to do was to like go outside and play with my friends at recess. And I got a lot of C's and sometimes D's, and like it was always like a big fight with my parents, and like all of the church people always just assumed like, oh, like you get good grades, like blah blah blah, and like you should be doing well in school. And it's like I don't. And when and so then I guess that gave me the mentality that I was like stupid and that I should be doing better in school, and why am I not? And so then I started trying to work harder, and I couldn't like get the grades that I wanted no matter how hard I tried. And
Right.
eventually I figured it out and I got help to be able to do that. But it was just they just assumed that I should be smart enough to do that. It was like
Right.
there shouldn't be that assumption. I don't think there should be that assumption.
Yeah.
No, there shouldn't be. No.
Or and then if you might make it more, I guess, on the church side of things, they just assume that you know everything about the Bible. You're not the one that went to seminary though. Like
You're right.
dad did, like your mom did. You know, the one who's the pastor. And then so like they would like say something about the Bible, and it's like I don't know. I know the Bible stories because like I grew up in the church, but I don't know everything about the Bible. I have the same questions and concerns that you guys have. I'm learning the same things that you guys have because I'm a lay person when it comes to the Bible because I didn't go to seminary.
Yeah. Right. Well, we had that experience. So Jaden's just now getting into youth group here. That doesn't make you feel old, Gabby. It should.
It does.
Yeah. So Jaden's just now starting in youth group, and we were chatting with our students. You know, we have a very small group right now, and we were playing some game, and we were asking them Bible trivia, and the other adult leader helping us was shocked that Jaden didn't know the answers to it, and I'm just like, we've not talked about that with her unless they talked about it in Sunday school.
Well, and the thing is she appreciates the Bible. She understands the importance of scripture and everything, but that's not her passion the way it is for Jason and I, because we're the pastors. She's a little science nerd.
She's exactly.
You ask her any dinosaur information, she'll tell you right off. But
I'm glad that's never changed.
Actually, she'll tell you right off whether you ask her or not. That's Jaden.
Yeah. Her latest dinosaur fact. And we'll correct you on how to say it correct too.
Yes. Now, one thing that I know a lot of other PKs have struggled with, and I'm hoping our children never feel this pressure, is the pressure to protect the image of the pastor. Did you ever feel like you had your behavior and everything reflected on your dad, and that if you behaved the wrong way, it was going to affect him bad, like negatively?
I mean, yeah, I feel like not only was it for my dad, but also, I mean, my parents raised me in a way that, like, if I behaved badly, I was disappointing them in a way. So it wasn't always like just for my dad, it was also my mom, because I think it more so reflected my mom being a passive wife,
Mhm.
because my dad was the one being busy in the church, and they're not, the most 20th century human beings and their mentality. And so I think our church really expected my mom to control us as kids when my dad's busy at church. And so if we were misbehaving, it reflected more badly on my mom. But my mom was the more working par partner of the two, because she was in residency and had working super long hours. So she wasn't home a lot, whereas my dad was the one who was more home for us. And so he
Right.
was more the present parent growing up. I don't think a lot of the church people realize that, but a
Yeah.
lot of times they put that pressure on my mom instead whenever we behaved badly, and like would come and like kind of chastise her. So yeah, I would say that sometimes I would feel guilty a lot whenever I did something wrong, because I knew my mom would kind of get some of the backhanded talk about that.
Mm.
So I'm sure that put a lot of pressure on you though too. I mean, it's like, okay, if I don't keep my stuff together, mom's gonna get in trouble. And
Yeah, I mean, we always had like a specific, as I said, expectation when we came to church to, talk and behave a certain way. And we'd be a little bit more crazier at home. And even if we went over like our church people's houses, we could be crazy then. It's just if we were at church, we had to be a little bit more quiet and dress a certain way and everything growing up. It's definitely changed a lot since then, but definitely growing up had a lot of that pressure.
yeah. Well, I know one thing, like, so we're here, our kids group is really growing like crazy. Um, but it's mostly church, our kids that have never been to church before in their life.
And their parents don't come.
And so one of the things I often
Yeah.
tell my kids is, maybe I'm wrong for saying this, and you can correct me if I am, but I'll tell them, look, to my kids, I'll be like, you guys have been coming your whole life, right? And so you can kind of set the example for other kids how they should be. Okay, like, I want you to have fun. I want you to be yourself. And then Gabby, you know me well enough to know I'm still crazy Jason, but maybe with a little bit more of a dad vibe now. But still the same old working with kids and teens as I've always been. But I do have that expectation for my kids, like, hey, yeah, you can kind of set, behave, you can kind of set the standard. Okay, what this is supposed to look like in some ways. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, and like I was given that growing up too. Like my dad every day would always tell us to be a leader, and whenever we would have issues with friends and um people around us, we always were told to be the bigger person and try and work things out. And there's some truth to that. As I got older, I learned some of it, but a lot of times when you're growing up, to have that pressure on you, it's really
mm,
hard to
Yeah.
process. And it's a lot of, again, expectation that
yeah,
like you just feel inadequate if you can't meet it.
right,
And I definitely think having that goal to meet was something that I could strive for, but whenever I didn't meet that standard, I didn't have the reassurance that I could get there one day. And so
right,
if you're gonna say things like that, I think that's perfectly fine. Just make sure when they don't meet the standard, say it's okay. You're gonna get there one day. Just remember who you are, and it's okay that we all make mistakes because you're human. So,
right,
um,
I think that's kind of one of the perks of me being up in the sound booth on Sundays, because when Ben does start getting overwhelmed or whatever, he starts to kind of lose his cool, because he's kind of started going through his prepubescent mood
yeah,
shift. And he's lost it a couple of times where he's just gotten really angry and like just and so rather than trying to tell him, okay, no, you have to manage your emotions right now and go right back into the situation that frustrated you. I tried being like pulling him out of it first and not forcefully isolating him or anything like that. I just like take him up to the sound booth with me and let him cool down. And then if he feels like he wants to go back and try again, he can. But then like while we're up there, I'll chat with him, be like, hey,
Yeah.
your emotions are justified, like your emotions are valid, but we need to figure out how we're going to manage these. And it's not because he's a PK, it's because we need to know how to manage our emotions in a way that isn't going to get us in trouble. Everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think one thing that's helped our kids here has been the fact that it's one of the main families at our church. Their dad was a longtime Nazarene pastor, evangelist too. And so like, my youngest Emma, she's not very social. Like you really have to get to know her before she comes out of her shell. Like I always tell people, it took her 2 years to get to where she liked and tolerated me, let alone anybody else. But I like one of the church ladies has been working on Empress for like the last year, but she's not very forceful about it. She just kind of like, I'm here, Emmy, like we'll get her little presents, give her little hugs when she needs them, but she doesn't really force the interaction. But
Yeah.
was it Sunday? Finally, Empress like went out of her way to give her a hug before she left, and
then the wife of the late evangelist, she has taken Ben under her wing, and she just spoils that boy rotten.
like he'll come home with like a $5. Like, where'd you get the $5? Like, Miss Libby gave it to me.
And she gives him hugs, tells him how precious he is, and it's building up his confidence so much, because all this family is doing is just speaking life into our kids, and I love it.
Yeah.
So
But so that we're kind of get a little more personal here, I guess. It just hasn't been personal enough. Um, so like we talked about how like you didn't go to seminary, or anything like that. You didn't go to school to become a preacher yourself. You went to school to learn science and medicine. But how did your own faith kind of grow within that fishbowl of the life that you had? Because here is everybody expecting you to have, this iron-like faith where you can stand up and preach sermons like your dad. I'm just trying to figure this out for me. So
Yeah. No, it definitely, I feel like as a pastor's kid, it can get pushed on you a lot, or it kind of gets formed for you early on. And for me, I feel like I thought growing up it was one thing, and then as I got older, I started realizing, I started coming out of the fishbowl a little bit, and my brain realized, oh, I can think for myself. And you kind of, when you kind of live in a pastor's family, you see a lot of the imperfections of the church, at the same time as seeing a lot of how they try to keep the church in a perfection era. And when you see that clash, it really makes you start doubting a lot of things that the church does.
yeah,
And so then I don't know. So then it makes you start questioning a lot of things. And who are you supposed to go to? Because for me, I wasn't super comfortable necessarily asking my dad, because I didn't want him to feel like he was putting me in a situation that his job was compromising like my faith and things like that. And then asking certain people around the church would make them think, oh, like what's going on at home in the pastor's family, things like that.
yeah,
And eventually, like I learned that I can go to people in the church and it's fine. But when you first start growing up and realizing that, scary to know that like you have these questions, like who can you go to? And so all these, as I said, you start questioning things, and you see all these imperfections in the church, and you start trying to find answers of why are pastors treated a certain way, or you hear and see all these sermons, and then you see a lot of pastors not doing those things at home. And I'm not necessarily saying like personally for my dad or things like that, but I interact with a lot of his like coworkers and things like
Yeah.
that. Um, and eventually you kind of just have to learn to, I think for me, going to college helped me be able to separate for a little bit so that
Yeah.
I can grow on my own because I wasn't at my home church, I wasn't in my family. I could see and hear a ton of different beliefs and understand maybe why the world thinks the way that they do outside of my family. And then decide for myself, okay, these are my beliefs. This is why we believe things as a church. And I
Right.
understand why there are imperfections in the church and then come to it. And then also understand that it's okay to question God and it's okay to have anger and it's okay to be mad at him sometimes.
That's right.
And um yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
That was a really
That's
good answer.
great. Yeah.
Um, was there a season
Like a specific time when
in your life where you were kind of, for lack of a better phrase, were you a little bit more rebellious against your upbringing, maybe more than?
like trying to push those boundaries of faith and tradition.
Um, so like I still like I guess pushing against maybe my upbringing per se, I would say right before I went to college and then wanting to go to college. I just knew I ended up going to a college further away to have that separation because I knew I needed it. I
Right.
like family means everything to me. Like I love my family, but I needed that time away from my family to like grow as myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just like hang out with friends. I had my own like schedule. I could plan out when I wanted to go to church, how I want to go to church, what activities I wanted to do, how I wanted to be involved in church because being a pastor's kid, you end up doing everything in the church. Like
That's right.
you
Yeah.
end up filling in where you don't want to fill in. You end up being part of the worship team. You end up doing the sound system. You end up cleaning the church. You end up doing like a million different things.
You end up with the youth
And
pastor pressuring you to preach all the time.
yeah. So like going to my own churches in college, I could decide how involved or how least involved I wanted to be and things like that. So in that aspect, I guess my rebellious was, oh, I could wake up one day and if I'm too tired, I don't have to go to church. Like, or if I wake up and I decide I don't like this church, I don't have to go back to it. And I can try a different one. And so I did like a lot of church hopping in college, and then like we had like something called late night on Wednesday nights where it was just straight worship, and I enjoyed that a lot better than listening to sermons because I sat in lectures all day in college. So
Right. Yeah.
there's like things like that I got to experience different aspects of church, I guess. And then as I said, I could stay out late as I wanted. I could go. I could go drive around with my friends. And eventually I bought my own car so I could drive anywhere I wanted and things like that. So yeah, I think college was more so it.
Um, was there a moment that maybe helped bring you closer to Jesus on a like just between you and him, where again it wasn't because of your parents, it wasn't because of it was something that happened or a moment where you just felt like, okay, I believe Jesus is real to me. I don't know if that question
Yeah,
makes sense or anything like that.
yeah. I mean, it's always like different times. I guess I can say the most recent one, or if you want me to say one growing up.
It's up to you. I'm not fishing for any particular. I'm not looking for an ego boost or anything like that. If that's what you're wondering.
No, no, it's fine. I just was because it's like a PK talk, so like I can talk about one maybe more related to being a PK
Well,
that
honestly, it really doesn't matter either way because sometimes a PK kind of does go their own way, and then at sometime in adulthood, they're like, no, that made sense. So even an adult experience that was powerful to you is perfect.
Yeah.
yeah. this one I can make it tied together. So like for me, back in like December, I had to take a round of boards for medical school. It was just like our certification exam to be able to see if you can pass to be good enough to be a doctor. And it's like a standardized exam that everyone has to take universally across the United States. And it was really hard. We had to like take a pre-exam basically from our school to basically say, oh, you can sit to take this exam. And I kept getting like just above the score that is passing, but our school like caught like asked for a score that's like higher than passing for us to sit. So I was getting a passing score in this, but I wasn't getting our school like required score. And so like it was just like frustrating because like I know if I went and took the exam I might pass, but my school was like you're like at risk of failing if you go and take it. The point is they basically made me do like a lot of extra like practice, and at the same time I was doing like rotations at the same time. So I was like going and working at the hospital for like 8 hours a day, then having to come home and do like 200 questions, which takes like 5 hours. And I was in Erie, so I was like separated from my husband. And this was like going on for like 3 months. And I was like, it's a really dark moment in my life because I was really doubting if I really should be a doctor.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, everything in my life has pointed me to this direction. Like God has shut every other door in my life. Like, well, why is He making this so hard for me to pass this test or be able to take this test, then pass it for me to be a doctor? Anyway, so I take the test, and then you have to wait like 4 weeks to find out if you pass it.
Oh man.
And I go back home finally, and it's Mr. and Mrs. Lytle's 50th anniversary, who are like for everyone else, it's this amazing couple who used to babysit me actually in my church. Who he's now a pastor of another church, but it was the 50th anniversary, and a bunch of our church people were going to it, and I, of course, had to go. And I, on the way there, I found out that my parents weren't going, and I was like, what? I was like, so who am I supposed to go with? And they're like, well, you know everyone from the church. And I was like, so my husband's working, so like I'm basically going by myself, and then gonna be with like all the church people. So like my parents like ditched me. And I go there and I'm like looking around and I sit at a table, and for your guys' reference, it's with Carrie and Debbie Kelly, and then Debbie Mooney at the time, and Paul, now Debbie Dillon. But and um yeah, they got married.
Didn't know that.
Yes, and so I'm just with like my parents' like closest friends from church basically at the table. And we were sitting there, and this is the first time I had laughed so hard in like 3 months after going through all of that with my board. And it was because I was sitting with my church people and who are my parents' friends, and I wouldn't have known them or like had their guidance or anything if it wasn't for my dad being a pastor at that church. Um, and it was just such a good night for me after going through what I had gone through for the past 3 months. Needless to say, I didn't drop out of med school and I would pass my exam because obviously now I'm a resident doctor. But it was just such a good night for me. And I like texted my dad and I was like, you know what I did tonight? I spent 3 hours laughing with your friends, and I hadn't laughed so much in like 3 months.
That's
That's what you
awesome.
get for ditching me.
Yeah, the fact that he wasn't there probably allowed you to have time to actually talk.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, your dad would love your dad, but he would have totally dominated that conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it was so fun. We were like voting people off the table, depending on who got more hugs from Bev and everything. And like if someone was misbehaving, we're like, oh, Terry's voted off the table.
That's awesome. I love that.
Uh,
So what are some things about how your parents raised you that they did right? Like, you know, you absolutely love this way that they raised you.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, as I said, I mean, kind of going back, they always told me that I had to be the bigger person. So, like, I think that taught me that no matter what, even if the situation's unfair or someone did me wrong, life's unfair and life's gonna suck, but, you know, you can't just, act like a little kid and cry and yell about it. You gotta just, you know, be professional per se and just approach the situation with respect and respect all the people around you. And then the other thing is you have to have a support system in life because you can't do life alone. And
Right.
so even if you're a pastor, you have to have a support system. So my
Yeah.
dad, like whenever my mom was sick, he had everyone in the church that like was there for him, and they would like cook us food. They came and babysat me and my brother, or they drove us around to like my basketball practices and things like that. Like you can't do life alone. God meant us to be in community with each other, and so embrace that. So those are the two life lessons I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, I 100% agree with both of those. What about some things that you wish had gone differently with how they raised you? Like, there's some
Yeah.
things you,
And this is not to be
yeah,
critical of them. This is just to help, pastors like us trying to raise our kids. That
No, because
maybe
I have
maybe
other
these are
pastors
things we
too.
can avoid.
let's just say I would love it if Jaden and Emrys turned out a lot like you.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, thank you. I would say just be wary of the expectations you put on them. I think I've mentioned this. And just if they it's okay to have, standards, but if they have too many standards, they're just gonna be really hard on themselves, and it's just something that they don't need to have on top of all the other pressures in life. It causes a lot more anxiety and a lot more, I don't want to say self-esteem issues because like I honestly like I love who I am. Well, it really makes you doubt some of your decisions sometimes. It makes you want to think that am I doing this correctly before instead of just making a decision and going with it. So just supporting them when they feel like they're inadequate. And if life does, knock them down, just be with them. And if they mess up, don't let them be able to come to you. Don't yell at them and say that they did everything wrong. Just let them cry and say, Mom, I messed up. Dad, please forgive me. And be like, yeah, you did. But we're gonna get out of it. So I feel like I was always afraid to tell my parents things if I did something wrong. And they should be the people that you should be able to go to first.
yeah,
That's good stuff.
yeah.
Um, I feel like we'll just skip to this last question because I feel like she just answered that one.
Yeah.
This last question for you is kind of more of what word of encouragement would you give for current pastors' kids trying to navigate this life? Like maybe they're a teenager, or maybe they're hitting that early college phase of, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I would say be yourself and enjoy life. You don't have to be perfect and ignore what everyone else has to say about you because your opinion matters the most about who you are.
It's really good. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gabby, for doing this for us. We appreciate it so much. I know there was a lot of strange questions in there that made you have to think. Sorry for making
No.
you have to think. But it's we're all about sharing real ups and downs, and Also, there's a lot of sacred things that happen in between those moments.
Yeah.
And all I know is that everything you shared is gonna be like super valuable for, you know, pastors and their kids and
Really lay people too.
lay people too, because let's face it, lay people put a lot of pressure on the pastors' kids too. And really, like, if we don't want pastors' kids leaving the church, we need to be thinking about how we're
Yeah.
treating them now. But thank you so much.
Any final thoughts for us here?
I don't think so.
All right.
Well, if this episode hit close to home, we'd love for you to share it with a pastor or a preacher's kid you know. Let's rewrite the narrative that PKs have to be either perfect or broken.
Yeah, and if you're a pastor's kid and you're listening to this episode and you want to comment on something that Gabby shared, or you want to share your story with us, feel free to reach out or leave some comments in the comment section on our Facebook page. We love to hear your story, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear your story as well. Do us a favor, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and leave us a review. That really helps this show get noticed and reach more people. And tag us at Table for Two Podcast if this one spoke to you.
But we'll be back next week with another honest and slightly unfiltered episode. Until then,
grace and peace, friends.
Through storms and swallowed our noise, church keys in hand, coffee and mugs, our lives held together by grace and a few hugs. They said she submits, we said we both do. It's not about ladders, it's me and you, serving the kingdom in aprons and jeans, lifelines and calloused hands and holy routines. At this table for two, there's room for you. Pull up a chair, we'll tell the truth, from love and faith with the side of faith.